Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, mostly from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Mr. Half-Eaten Burger. He is The Athletic's Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing tonight?
A little hungry. I should probably eat the rest of that burger.
Is that the flies are circling? We'll be shut down in a week. Also joining us here for this live show, we're going to introduce first Eric Thompson of the Daily Norseman. Eric, how are you doing?
I am so excited to be here for the Case Cookus celebration of life ceremony.
Yeah, the premier Case Cookus podcast.
Yeah. That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a wake, but it's a wake. And also at the table is celebrated Vikings podcaster and the man who was able to get in despite his terrible fake ID, Mr. Luke Braun from Locked On NFL. Luke, welcome to the show.
If anybody out there is a cop, you have to tell me.
That's actually just a good principle to have normally. If you could just work that in, that would be nice. All right, well, welcome to this week's episode. We are, of course, live this week. We are coming to you from the Union 32 Craft House here in Eagan, Minnesota, and I am drinking the saltiest beer here, which is going to cause my voice to make all sorts of terrible noises. But
I'm different from the usual terrible noises.
Different from the usual terrible, but terrible all the same. But just want to thank you so much to the Union 32 Craft House for hosting us. Thank you to Eric for showing up. Thank you to Luke for not having anything better to do today.
Yeah, always.
I was going to thank Eric for neglecting his children for a little longer today to come out to help us with this show. Plenty of stuff to talk about, especially with the joint practices. Also, Case Keenum has come back to the team. And well, I say Case Keenum. The man has the greatest name in the history of the Vikings. And it was my fault for putting him in, 91 point font at the beginning of the show notes. We'll talk a little bit about Case Cookus and his...
He's a Raider now.
And his Raiderdom now.
Yeah.
But, Kirk Cousins returned to the team. We have plenty of stuff to talk about, including the injury to Christian Darrisaw, Justin Jefferson's fall, and a surprising situation involving the kicker and his wife. But before we do any of that, again, just want to thank you for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to support Norse Code, you can do so in many different ways. You can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and give $3.50 per month, or $3.50 to help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. As I pick up Norse Code Nessie, thank you again, John Mainland. You can go there for bonus episodes. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well. And today I'm actually going to be giving away some of these shirts you can buy over at norsecode.threadless.com. So before we start, just want to thank a couple of fine people who have donated to the show. Kent Dezizu, or Kent Dezizu. I apologize. I know I am terrible at names, but it's really not my fault this time. Is it?
I don't have anything to add.
Just leaving him out to dry.
Yeah,
Thank you, Arif, for having my back.
Yeah. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. It's on you.
Also, a thank you to Casey Heiger, who increased his Patreon contribution. Also, Don Rio, thank you. Billy Lindstead Goldsmith has a message for Arif. Says, long overdue to add my support, despite not keeping bees and having tried all of Arif's parenting advice with nothing but regret.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I love what you guys do and appreciate your great insights and fun. Next roadshow in Philly, please. I'll bring a crew to ensure your safety or get beat up with you. You know what?
That's fair.
That's a friend.
That's a threat.
That is a friend.
We'll bring our own beer cans. We'll have a whole hullabaloo. It'll be fine.
In a very self-aware Philadelphia.
Right, yeah.
We're going to have all the D batteries ready for you.
That was Los Angeles.
On our way out, we're punching all the horses. It's going to be fine. And also a special thank you to Ewan Dewar, and again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name, said, "Hey guys, just wanted to send a message of support alongside the Patreon. I'm not even a Vikings fan, just a Brit who follows the sport. I'm a data-minded person. I work in a soccer company, a soccer data company, and will be collecting data on American football starting this year, and have always thought Arif's work was great. So I decided to check out the podcast on a whim. It's brilliant. The amount of effort that goes into providing truly detailed stuff is leagues above what most other podcasts have, and the tone is self-deprecating and level-handed in a way that avoids the usual tribal, self-serious toxicity that puts me off of other team-specific podcasts."
Yeah, sure.
So, I think it's fair to say that
Sorry.
Norse Code has reached the mainstream.
We've reached soccer.
Before we had reached rugby. When we were getting like 1 million rugby questions from Australia. So, all things are possible. is I think what we're learning. So, again, thank you so much, Ewan, and everybody else who is supporting us over on Patreon.com. Again, we are live from the Union 32 Craft House. Thank you guys so much for having us. Really do appreciate it. And before we start, I want to mention briefly the fantasy lottery this year.
Oh boy.
Over 150 names in 12 days.
Jesus.
150 people have decided that they want to be a part of this. So if you too want to be a part of the lottery in what is going to be something you explain to your therapist later, with the negative 25-point rule for the extra point, negative 25, please email me at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com, or please go to the Twitter account at NorseCodeDN and send a quick message over there, include your email address, and I'll be happy to include you in the list of people who really should know better. But now with all of that done, with all that taken care of, the big news out of today involved Christian Darrisaw. Now, in the morning, there was a report that he had spent some time in Philadelphia. And whether it's, I don't know if it's just a problem of like Central America Vikings can't go east without without there being like a surgery or something.
Yeah.
But Christian Darrisaw went out to Philadelphia. The initial report was that he was getting a second look at something, and then today it was later today it was revealed that he had a minor surgery on what was reported to be core muscles. Arif, what do we know about that exactly?
Right, so the initial reports are, so he initially went to see a specialist to get a second opinion. The initial reports are that it is a fairly minor operation. The doctors expect him to be ready by week 1, which I don't think means he's going to play week 1, but he might be active. I would expect he's actually not even that. But I don't know, the Zimmer himself is like fairly frustrated about the whole thing. Not necessarily at Darrisaw, just at the situation. He said earlier today that they'd expected all of this to be kind of done in January when he initially had the operation. So he played through an injury the entire year in college. He has actually done that a couple of times. And in January he had an operation on his core. And that's why we don't have pro day numbers on him or anything like that. He skipped out in his pro day. And then by camp, he was supposed to be ready. He did a couple of practice days at camp, and something happened. He doesn't know whether or not it's a setback or whether or not that kind of movement just kind of revealed some other issues. They initially thought scar tissue from the surgery was moving around. That's not it. It turns out there's just kind of some other stuff to take care of. We don't have a ton of details, but it sounds like he just had a secondary minor operation to kind of clean up whatever is happening in that area, the core muscle surgery, right? So the initial reports are fairly relatively optimistic, but the Vikings themselves are fairly frustrated because this just wasn't the plan. Back in January, before they even drafted him, they kind of expected him to be available. He's not. So they're likely going to be relying on Rashad Hill, who has already missed a couple of practices due to injury. He left later today at the end of practice because of a minor injury. So third string left tackle Blake Brandel had to play against Von Miller, which I did not go well. So
you're kidding.
Yeah, no, it's a big surprise. Yeah,
Luke, was it as bad as he's saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Von Miller killed everybody.
yeah. But yeah, so I would expect week one, and maybe the first couple of weeks, that Rashad Hill's going to start. Honestly, Rashad Hill is like a really good backup tackle, but that's not a confidence-inspiring sentence. He'll probably be okay. He'll be a below-average tackle, which is probably more than you can expect in a situation like that. I don't know how ready Darrisaw is going to be by the time he actually plays because he missed essentially all of the offseason. Yep. So the left tackle situation is probably not going to look stellar for most of the season. And this is kind of why, because the whatever operation he had back in January didn't resolve whatever situation he was playing through. So that's the issue with the Vikings' first-round pick. It feels like just kind of like, yeah, it's how the offensive line works, but the Vikings are frustrated.
So the Vikings are obviously frustrated with the situation. Vikings fans have had a lot of fun poking or just kind of pointing and laughing at the situation over in New Orleans with Michael Thomas and the thought of him like missing part of the season because of his not getting a surgery early, and of course that goes directly back on us.
Right.
Eric,
yeah.
why can't we have nice things?
I don't know. There's a Venn diagram out there some idiot on Twitter made, and it just keeps on coming true over and over again. So yeah, I blame that guy.
Have you like filed for that to be an NFT, or like could Arif help you figure out a way to make that a thing? Because I feel like that's something that.
Well, I did turn it into GIF form earlier this year, like a couple months ago.
That's not what an NFT is.
I know, but like, that's as far as I'm going. No,
I kid you not. I know a guy.
There you go.
So if anything positive comes from today's show, it's that Luke has a friend who can help.
I have an NFT guy.
Yeah.
All right, there it is.
Luke's riding the blockchain.
2021 is so dumb. I swear to God. All right, so Christian Darrisaw is obviously not going to be playing this weekend. They are hopeful. So the core muscle is what was mentioned in the report. It's just a tweak.
It's just a tweak. Don't worry about it. Just a tweak.
Offensive linemen don't need core muscles. What would you need that for?
All right, is this so?
Lower abdomen, upper groin.
Yeah, upper groin. Yeah, that's.
I mean, it can't be fun.
No, so you can rub some dirt on that and be fine, I'm sure. So, yeah, obviously the Christian Darrisaw kind of surprised everyone this morning. The Vikings aren't happy about it at all. But let's talk about a big near miss as far as injuries are concerned, because Justin Jefferson went down. It was either yesterday or the day before. I think it was the day before. Justin Jefferson went down, and there was some concern about his shoulder.
Friday.
Oh,
yeah,
it was on Friday. Okay. Yeah. So Justin Jefferson is fine, but what ended up happening there?
Yeah, fine-ish. Yeah, he landed on his shoulder. Actually, so it looked awful when it happened. Like it looked like
the Rodgers collarbone thing.
Yeah, it looked exactly like the Rodgers collarbone thing, and that was kind of the concern, that he would have broken his collarbone. But yeah, he went down on his shoulder. He was down on the ground for a while. Looked like he was in pretty serious pain. Gets up, walks off on his own power after being down for a while, and then it was later reported that it was just in AC joint sprain. Well, sprains are minor tears, I guess. And he should be ready by week one, but we're probably not going to see him in the preseason. We're probably not going to see him I guess camp's over, I guess. So we're not going to see him in a lot of these practices coming up. So, yeah, but I don't expect it to be too big a problem.
He'll probably play through a lot of pain throughout the whole year, but he'll play.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and it seems like that injury it's you're dealing with pain for several weeks and probably throughout most of the season, but it doesn't really limit his mobility, and I can just it sounds like he was pretty antsy at the last few practices.
Yeah, it looked like he wanted to move
this is
around.
This is kind of his first major injury, the way it sounds like. He was never really hurt at LSU, so this is probably a new experience for him. So
yeah, he was moving all around, because he was at practice today, not in pads, of course.
Yeah,
and he was just moving all around the field looking for something to do. Very antsy.
Do you need help filling the water?
Yeah, what can I do?
What can I do to make your lives easier? And speaking of which, Anthony Barr looked to be not practicing today as well. Do we know anything about that?
I mean, there's not really a report about an Anthony Barr injury or anything like that. Anytime Barr kind of misses a little bit of practice time, we ask about it, and they're like, well, he's not injured. We're just kind of resting him. Seems like he gets more rest than anybody else. So I imagine that there's something there, but it's not serious enough for them to have to report it.
Part of that restructure.
Yeah. If this were during the season, they'd have to put him on the injury report and explain why. So this is just kind of part of the preseason thing where you don't really get any information on a player. But it didn't look like anyone was concerned about it, and he does kind of just show up and watch practice, and he'll put on pads every so often and play. So, like, he was at practice yesterday, I think, right?
He was limited yesterday. He did individual stuff,
Yeah.
but he didn't do any of the team stuff.
Yeah, and then 2 days before he was in pads, and then the prior 2 days to that, he wasn't in pads at all, and he was just resting. So I don't really know what's going on there, but it looks like coaches aren't that concerned, and it looks like he kind of can just suit up whenever.
Well, yeah, this isn't a new phenomenon for Anthony Barr. I mean, before his injury last year, he kind of misses practices, and coaches kind of seem to shrug it off in the press conferences. So it's hard to pin down. You hope it's not related to him coming back to the injury he had last year that made him miss all but a game and a half of last year. But I think they're taking it cautious. And again, he's a veteran. He knows the defense. It's not a matter of reps for him. I think it's just preserving his body.
It's more of a situation of like, just actually going out onto the field and doing it as opposed to anything else. He's set. He just needed a day.
Several times.
Speaking of somebody who, this guy didn't need a day. He got a couple of days. Kirk Cousins returned
He got a couple of days,
He got a couple of days there. Kirk Cousins returned to camp. He lined up at the post, fake cigarette in mouth, and took the full brunt of the Vikings press firing squad. Managed to walk away fairly unscathed, though you can't have a more memeable quarterback at this point.
Right.
Than Kirk Cousins and his plexiglass armor.
Right. I mean, like, I've seen Bubble Boy memes everywhere. The thing is, like, obviously there's a ton of quarterbacks and a ton of players who are not vaccinated, who have taken questions from the press and haven't been hit as hard as Kirk. And there's a number of reasons for that, some of which make some sense, some of which kind of don't. The biggest reason, of course, is that he actually missed a ton of time, even though, he never tested positive. And a lot of it's just because his presser answers are just kind of just make everything look worse. Like, he doesn't really have a handle on how to answer these in a way that kind of diffuses the tension. Like, Lamar Jackson said he was going to look into it more. I am a little bit suspicious that he's going to do a ton of extra research beyond what he's did, but he did say he was going to talk to team doctors, right? And so that's like something.
Well, to Lamar's credit, he has researched twice.
Yeah, right, yeah. He's got firsthand experience multiple times over. But there's even like speculation that like the reason Lamar cramped up in the middle of that game last year was actually because of COVID-related residual effects, which, he wasn't dehydrated, it's just kind of a residual effect of having had it. And, obviously that created some pretty significant problems. They had to play Trace McSorley, who was tried out as a safety when in the draft. Like, that's how good of a quarterback he is. That's where they ended up. And so, obviously there's like a ton of other players, and like Cole Beasley's obviously faced a lot more criticism because he's been very vocal about it. But like Cousins just handles these pressers so poorly. Like, starting out by blaming the size of the room or the Vikings for putting them in a poorly sized room per protocol, instead of talking about, just this is how protocol works and just kind of taking it without even having to worry about taking like all of the blame. He found a place to put it. And then talking about kind of just some bizarre ideas about how to avoid this going forward, like having quarterback meetings underneath the goalposts in February or in January. Yep. Not February. That's not likely.
You would say that if you were on Paul Allen's show. You're just not saying that.
Yeah. It's all about context.
Before the show, I had told Arif that I appreciated how diplomatic he was being on Paul Allen's show the other day, because the day before he was on our show and had basically said the world is on fire as far as the kicking situation is concerned. He goes on Paul Allen's show and he's like, I'm not sure the answer to our kicking situation is on the team right now.
That's a very polite way to put it.
Yeah.
I heard it.
I'm listening at my desk going, wow, that's there's diplomatic
you
and
know
then
your
there's
audience.
that.
You just know your audience. That's all. But yeah, Cousins received a lot of fire for what he said, both literally there while we were there, and then later like on Twitter and on WCCO and all kind of Pro Football Talk, all the kind of various areas where people report on this. I think Good Morning Football even had something to say, and they only say nice things about players. So that was pretty brutal for him. I'm sure he doesn't care.
So I don't often get a chance to quote Dusty in on the show. Pre-show, yes.
Rest
but I don't
in
get
peace.
a chance to quote Dusty often. But Dusty had said when Kirk's...
Dusty would say if he were alive.
Yeah, well,
Right.
holding up today's newspaper in my basement, Dusty would say. So Arif had tweeted that Kirk Cousins says he's been doing a lot of research. When asked if he's made contact with Dr. Alan Silas, he says no. Dusty's reply, when I do a lot of research about my car, I studiously avoid talking to the mechanic. Now, here's the thing about the Kirk Cousins thing. I'm not here to tell you to get vaccinated. I'm not here to tell you not. What I am here to tell you is this. As far as the mood on Kirk Cousins, it has shifted from fan to fan in a slightly different way. If you were adamantly opposed to him and his contract, it moved you further into that camp. If you were on the fence about him, being like, well, he has paid a lot of money, but it's not really all of his fault. He's kind of in a weird situation. They're doing more passing or whatever. It's moved you more toward it's his fault and he's the problem. Those that are adamantly for him, blind love and everything else, even that has moved a little bit to, wow, I'm all for the guy, but you're really not going to put yourself in a position to be able to bounce back quickly from all of this and be able to handle it. It has.
Well, there is and maybe it's because it's just what my Twitter mentions are, so I've got an unbalanced exposure to it. But there are a couple of people that consider him a hero.
There's a
for
faction
sure.
of Vikings Twitter, and it's not just Kirk Cousins. It's a lot of the quarterbacks.
Right.
That
It's your favorite team's quarterback, yeah.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins is a hero. Adam Thielen's a sidekick somehow.
What is this? A quarterback room for ants?
Precisely. It's a weird situation, but the point is that even throughout all of Vikings fandom, it has evoked emotions, and for the most part, it has ended up being more negative than positive.
Yeah, it's been much more negative than positive.
About Kirk.
Yeah.
And if we ignore the fact he had to go away for a few days, if we ignore the presser, if we ignore the quarterback room for ants,
What's bigger now?
what we're left, it's bigger now.
Yeah, he helped his fellow quarterbacks get a bigger room to meet in. I mean, he's
honestly,
a team player.
that's a
Team
remarkable
player.
use of leverage.
Could you
Labor
ask for a
hero
better
Kirk
leader?
Cousins.
Labor leader.
Could you ask for a better leader?
Right.
Overall, since coming back, he hasn't looked good.
Today, I thought he looked, and I wasn't watching as much of the offense, so Luke and Eric can contradict me. But normally you can't, but this time.
Finally.
But I thought Kirk Cousins looked a lot better today than he did in any of the prior practices since coming back, but he was struggling a lot since coming back from the COVID reserve list. Sailing passes, missing screens, not doing a very good job managing the pocket. And he seemed frustrated, he was throwing his helmet on the ground. It was very much like Adam Thielen and Bill Belichick. It was very, he was willing to yell. And it just, he wasn't getting the timing down. And he mentioned that this was the first time he had missed 4 consecutive practices in his career, even going all the way back to high school. So it might have just been that rhythm in particular is really important for him as a quarterback, something that I've said before that, without a preseason, one of the bigger reasons that he started off slow is because he's a very rhythm and chemistry-oriented quarterback because of how much he kind of relies on the system, on timing and mechanics, on relying on playing textbook quarterback football. And it seems like that rhythm was thrown off. Now today, it seemed like he was playing a lot better, but you two can speak to that better than I can.
He started off really poor, but then once you got past the 7-on-7, you got into 11s, you got further into the practice, he kind of got better as it went along. Mm-hmm. But I think that was I also noticed that when he was struggling the last few days, it was kind of worse when he was throwing to third teamers, and when it was Thielen, when it was Irv Smith. Guys that he's well, Smith Marset was awesome today, but when it was guys that he was more used to, it seemed a little bit cleaner, and he struggled more in the last couple days with Blake Pearl before he got hurt, and guys like Watt Filer, that they're just that chemistry isn't quite down yet.
Yeah.
And that seems to, that's kind of a microcosm of him as a quarterback. When things are on schedule and go as planned, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. When the play develops like it's supposed to, like it's drawn up, he can make all the throws. He makes great decisions. It's when things are a little off schedule and things break down is where he struggles, and that's probably true to the day-to-day of training camp as well. It's going to take him a little time to get more ramped up and back into the flow of things.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins not great at adapting to changing circumstances.
On multiple levels. That's a very concise and correct statement, Lou.
That was good.
We'll definitely take that. Let's talk about Blake Proehl. Blake Proehl went down, but not necessarily out.
Super out.
He is super out?
Yeah.
It hasn't been officially reported, but he posted on his own. Oh, is it like
No,
official?
it hasn't.
Yeah.
You're right.
But he was there in crutches and a big brace today, and he posted on his own Instagram last night, basically like, here
We'll get
comes
him
the
next year,
healing
yeah.
process. I'd be very shocked if he wasn't done for the year.
Yeah, not a lot of people, like, after an injury post, like, I thank God every day for every one of my opportunities without it being, like,
Pretty serious.
yikes. Yeah. But yeah, his Instagram post seemed like pretty definitive. It was a non-contact injury, which makes me think that it's like ACL plus some others. But most likely at least ACL. But
The
yeah,
ACL grab bag.
Yeah, ACL grab bag. Maybe an MCL, maybe an LCL, maybe a PCL, maybe a meniscus. Yeah, maybe he lost a leg. But yeah, it seems like he's probably going to be out for the season. He will at least make whatever money that players in injured reserve make, which for a player with his contract is going to be a lot less than it is going to be as a percentage of what he was going to get than it is going to be for others. So this is kind of a big issue for him, and then obviously the Vikings are looking for receiver depth. He probably wouldn't have made the team. He probably would have been a practice squad, but that would have been really nice for him. And it would have been nice for the Vikings to be able to kind of draw upon that depth. So I'm guessing he's out. We don't know for sure, but I am like 90% confident that he's just going to be waived injured and then put on injured reserve when the season starts.
Let's talk about the greatest name in the history of the Minnesota Vikings.
Case Cookus.
Case Cookus.
Case Cookus.
Case Cookus was signed and subsequently released when Kirk Cousins returned to the team. Can you say a few words? What was your favorite memory of the Case Cookus
I told you this was a celebration of life of Case Cookus at the top. Okay, good. I'm glad we're here.
It's Case Cookus. Those are my first two words. That's my favorite memory of Case Cookus. Tweeting out the words Case Cookus every day. That made me feel alive.
It brought hope and meaning to an otherwise sad existence.
And so now that he's literally going to the black hole as a member of the Raiders, it may not be the end of the Case Cookus era. He could come back, but certainly there's a Case Cookus shaped void on the Vikings roster now.
I feel like there's a Case Cookus in all of us. We just need to
In you, there are two Cookuses.
Although when he did get released, I did get to do the worst dad joke I've done in several years. That's the way the Cookus crumbles.
Oh my God!
I appreciated that.
I rolled my eyes after sending. Yeah, after clicking send, I'm like, oh, but that was terrible. Yeah.
You may have ruined everyone else's day, but I appreciate it.
All right, good.
So me having a good day probably ruined someone else's. So.
But that's definitively true.
Before we talk about how the joint practices have gone, I want to mention some breaking news from Chris Thomason. During the actual practice last week, where he accidentally broke the news that the kicker's wife had left him.
I think it's a HIPAA violation.
It's a HIPAA violation. You can't say that.
It seems like that's the sort of thing you tell the fella first.
Okay, right? Yeah.
You never want to hear You never want to hear it first on Chris Thomason's timeline.
Can you imagine if that's how you find out? Like, players find out that they get traded via Twitter all the time, and it like sucks, right?
Yeah.
Or that they're about to be released. But like finding out that your wife left you via Twitter.
Different kind of transaction there.
Yeah, that's new. That's crazy. No, I mean, CT Chris Thomason plays it fast and loose on Twitter.
Who among us?
Punctuation optional.
Yeah, earlier today he told me he just really needs a full keyboard for his phone. Unprompted, he just said it. which was pretty special for everybody there. And what had actually happened for people who didn't see the tweet is that Greg Joseph had kicked it wide left. And yeah, right, yeah, very new experience for Vikings fans.
And not something you have any familiarity with at all.
Oh no, that phrase is completely new to me. But yeah, so he kicked it wide left, and he typed out wife left, and my
Greatest typo ever.
incredible,
Greatest typo
just incredible.
Thank you.
And so my
autocorrect.
colleague at The Athletic, Chad Graff, showed Greg Joseph, who had apparently not seen this, showed Greg Joseph the tweet, and was like, "Hey, this is pretty funny, huh?" And Greg Joseph was like, "Oh, okay." Like, no reaction at all. And like Chad is dying, right? It's so funny. Like Chad, like he's like, "Did you see this funny tweet about you?" And Greg Joseph was like, "That is in fact a tweet about me. It looks like it contains a typo." Like there's just no reaction at all.
And I demanded to put that story on today's show because that, to me, despite everything Arif said last episode, if we ignore Arif's analysis for a moment, I want this man to be the
Only a
kicker
moment.
for the Vikings simply because I can trust him in clutch situations.
Ice
now.
in his veins.
Ice
If he's
in
not
his
reacting
veins.
to that tweet. I mean,
Nothing phases
nothing's
the
gonna shake
man.
him. Yeah.
He found out his wife left him in a tweet. And instead of like picking up his phone to make a phone call, instead, you're like, yeah, that was a tweet about me. Not since Ricky Henderson have you seen such self-confidence.
True.
Just
Yeah,
astonishing.
it will speak to his consistency in pressure situations, but he is consistently pretty poor. So I don't know that consistency is going to be all that valuable.
Well, now I want Greg Joseph to be like in a press conference after game. Yeah, Greg Joseph could have kicked better. Like now I want him to talk in the third person.
Exactly. He needs to go the full Ricky Henderson at this point. I would completely support this. Let's talk about the joint practices. Had a couple now. What has been the big takeaway as far as the joint practices are concerned? And if I can get an obligatory question out of the way, how does Teddy look?
I'll start with the last part first. Teddy doesn't look all that great, honestly, which sucks. I want him to do well. I want him to be the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos. That'd be a lot of fun. And it sounds like he will be because Drew Lock seems to be worse. But that's not really how you want to win a quarterback competition.
That is a really good way to be the number one quarterback for a team.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like the beginning of practices today, Teddy looked on fire. He was like electric. He was doing some really great stuff, threw some pretty deep balls, honestly, and had like a little bit more zip on the throws than I've seen in a while. It didn't remind me of like how good his 2016 preseason was, but it was like, that could be the quarterback that he was. It didn't look like that yesterday, so I was really surprised. And then after that first team session, he just kind of fell apart. He threw, a pair of picks to Eric Kendricks?
And almost a third one, yeah.
Yeah, and almost a third one, and that was in sevens. And then in red zone drills, he threw another pick. He was kind of inaccurate. He was holding onto the ball a little bit too long, took a couple of, quote-unquote sacks. I mean, he didn't look very good. And then the other day, his best throw was not a very good throw. It was saved by Jerry Jeudy. He threw it. It was another post route. It was kind of identical to the throw today. But he threw it a little bit late, a little bit behind. It probably would have been picked by Brashad Breeland, who was undercutting the route and going for it, and Jeudy just kind of won the contest. It shouldn't have been a contested throw at all. And that was his best throw of yesterday. So he didn't look very good. But Drew Lock looks like worse. So there you go.
All you can really ask for. They had mentioned who was starting on Saturday. Who's starting?
Drew Lock is going to be starting the preseason game, but I'm guessing they want Teddy to win the job. They just don't want to completely close Drew Lock out of situations with the first team to have that full evaluation. So there's that. Other than that, joint practices for the Vikings, I think day one was really sloppy for both teams on offense. Pretty exciting for both defensive lines. And kind of mixed results on the back end with the secondary. Today I thought the secondary played a lot better for the Vikings, and the defensive line continued to play really well. So I think the biggest takeaway is that the Vikings defensive line has gone from probably one of the worst in the league last year to one of the scariest. I mean, they were dominant against the Broncos offensive line. I don't think it's like necessarily the best in the league or anything like that, but talking to Broncos beat writers, it seems like they expect an average, maybe a little bit below average offensive line. They've invested a lot of resources into some players that they like. It's a system very similar to the ones that they're going to be playing a lot this year. A lot of wide zone stuff, a lot of boot stuff, kind of like the Vikings. Michael Pierce was just constantly in the backfield, and Danielle Hunter wasn't even participating in these practices.
Right.
So for how good that defensive line looked, they didn't even have their premier player, who is coming off of, I think, maybe the best camp showing I've seen for an edge rusher. And I've seen a lot of pretty good edge rushers in the Vikings' time. So I'm pretty excited for how that defensive line is going to look. That's my biggest takeaway. I think both teams' receivers look really electric and exciting. A lot of speed on the field. But I think the biggest takeaway is how exciting that defensive line looks.
I will certainly take it. Anything is an improvement over whatever passed for a defensive line last year.
Yeah.
But what's so as far as the camp battles are concerned, how is we can go down the list as far as quarterback and everything else. Is there anything that's jumping out at you that is a bit of a surprise so far in camp?
Yeah. Well. I'm gonna kick something over to Luke because he was able to watch a bit more of the offense today than I was. But I think the way Ihmir Smith-Marsette was playing, he's 5th round pick from Iowa, 5th round, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5th round pick from Iowa. Vikings apparently just find 5th round receivers. I don't know.
Specifically
6
5th round
foot,
receivers.
190 from a Big Ten school.
Yeah.
It's an odd talent to have, but
yeah.
it's what they're dealing with.
If only Stacey Coley could have lived up to it. But yeah, I mean, he looked really exciting, and I don't think he's going to win the wide receiver 3 job or anything like that. It looks like that's between KJ Osborne and D.D. Westbrook, who has not really participated in practices yet. But it looks like the Vikings might finally have depth at receiver. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, Ihmir Smith-Marsette was really good. Just the twos in general got a lot of run today, and a lot of the situational stuff, and they just looked really sharp. Chad Beebe, I think, had a couple of good practices. I didn't see him much yesterday, but I think
yesterday he was great.
Yeah, he was good again. KJ Osborne has been really, really consistent throughout all of camp, and he's basically locked in that wide receiver 3 job. And I mean, the Broncos had this kind of reconstructed secondary with Kyle Fuller, and they spent their a top 10 pick on it and stuff, and they seemed outmatched today by our dumb wide receivers, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Minus Justin Jefferson, that's
right, yeah.
that's and Adam Thielen, they went pretty easy on him. They're definitely kind of similar thing to Anthony Barr or whatever. They don't need to look at him.
Yesterday Thielen left Kyle Fuller out of his shoes. On a couple of plays, and I think they were well, we know who we have here. Let's put Adam Thielen on ice.
He's ready.
It's fine. Kyle Fuller's dead. We've done too much. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, Eric. Have you seen anything kind of interesting?
Yeah, I think it's just nice to have options, because I think that was one of the biggest questions going into this camp was who's going to be that third wide receiver, especially if something happened in camp. Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen went down. And now to have multiple seemingly viable players, because I was really worried about going in. It's Chad Beebe and a whole bunch of nothing. And now to have Ihmir Smith-Marsette showing off his speed. Although Zimmer did comment again today about his special teams work, which that's going to be the way. Yeah, I mean,
that's not a big deal to me. So Zimmer said a couple days ago that in order for Ihmir Smith-Marsette to make the team, or really in order for any receiver to make the team, they have to be good on special teams. And it was a criticism of Ihmir Smith-Marsette, but people seem to take it they're going to cut a good player.
No, they're not going to. I don't take it as that. No.
Yeah, I mean, that's how people the problem is when you're in person and you're talking to him, you can see what he's putting emphasis on, what he's not putting emphasis on, what's really important to him. And so he emphasized that he thought Ihmir Smith-Marsette, both today and a couple days ago, he emphasized he thinks he's going to be a good player.
For sure.
And he thinks he's going to be a contributor on offense maybe as soon as this year. And then he adds on, kind of incidentally, but he's going to have to do a little bit more on special teams. He's going to have to do a little bit more in order to make the roster as a special teamer, and he's going to have to want it. And I think a lot of people, without that context of tone, seeing it in text on Twitter or in an article, seem to think that Zimmer's kind of willing to let a player that might be good on offense go because he's not doing it on special teams. And I think Zimmer is just trying to motivate him through the media to want to do more on special teams. We were talking to Amir Abdullah a couple days ago as well, and we asked, like, hey, what's kind of you've split your focus between being on offense, for a while you were a first stringer on offense, and also being a special teamer, not just as a returner, but as a gunner or in any other role, a punt protector. You've done a lot on special teams. What's the key there? And I thought we were going to hear something about like coaching points, about paying attention to your P's and Q's and technique and stuff like that. And really, Abdullah just said, yeah, that kind of stuff is important, right? Like, it is important that you play with good technique. But on special teams, what really matters is whether or not you care. Because so many of the people that make it into the NFL were the top of their talent pool in middle school, the top of their talent pool in high school. We're told
to slum it,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
and
like
so
thing.
they're told, hey, you're never going to get a D1 offer, so you should find other options, do things besides football that work for you. Then they get that D1 offer, they get that scholarship, they go into college, and they're told, hey, you might not even start, but also you should find other options. You're not even going to make it into the NFL, and then they've made it in the NFL. So they're constantly told, hey, you're going to have to beat insane odds in order for you to be able to make it to whatever level, and they have constantly. And it can't help. I don't really blame them. It can't help but kind of feed a sense of self and pride that a lot of people will call ego, and probably fairly so, but and certainly translates into ego, but is kind of difficult for you to kind of envision if all you've ever done is be successful at the highest level of the game, and now you're told, hey, you got to do this thing in the third phase of the game that no one really pays attention to and your name's not going to be called out. And so Abdullah was just saying, like, you just got to have a lot of heart. Like, on special teams especially, when things are running at 20 miles an hour, the guy with the better technique is gonna lose to the guy who wants it more, which you hear all the time in sports, but feels a lot more true on special teams when a lot of those people are really not motivated to do well on special teams. And I think that's kind of what Zimmer is driving at, that Ihmir Smith-Marsette, even though he only got like 500 yards at Iowa, was Iowa's leading receiver, right, for 2 years running. And is a deep play specialist. So he's got all kinds of big plays on his belt. He has like a rush. He had a game where he had a return touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. And so he's kind of like, and he feels kind of like a Jerome Simpson in terms of his level of confidence. And so he needs to channel that energy into special teams. So that's kind of what Zimmer was getting at. It's not a concern to me. I don't think they're going to cut Ihmir Smith-Marsette, but I think Zimmer wants to get him to bring that energy into special teams.
And in the same press conference, Zimmer did give him the coveted good player tag, which he doesn't bestow.
Gonna
on
be
just
a good
everyone.
player.
Yeah, he's gonna be
he doesn't say that a lot about rookies.
Yes, exactly. And every single Iowa fan that follows me on Twitter, at least, can't quit raving about Smith-Marsette and how underutilized he was at Iowa and how talented he actually is. So that I'm really excited about him. And Osborne, I mean, right now, like, I don't know who's going to wrest away Mr. Mankato from him, because he's got. I mean,
Jake Browning. Jake Browning's throwing more passes than anybody else.
Browning, that is true. I did watch all 75 passes of him last Saturday. That was a blast. But it's promising just to have the options where it didn't look like we were going to have a lot going into the season.
That thing about like wanting it on special teams is like, I think eventually Kene Nwangwu gets the kick return job, because that's like an identity for him.
Yeah.
Like, he feels like if you read interviews about him, he's a kick returner before he's a running back, like in his mind, and he loves the art of the kick return and finding the creases and like the way that things develop and playing at that high speed and stuff. Like, he loves it. And he's gotten more run at running back because they do more reps and stuff. But it's like an identity.
He is so fun to watch in space. He can make things happen with that speed. So that's both of the Iowa guys. They've been pleasant surprises for me.
It's kind of interesting. Both of them are like fairly clear, like, because we've seen a lot of fast players in camp. Jeff Badette comes to mind. He ran like a 4.27 or something like that.
Yeah, he was in that fastest.
Yeah, he was in the he was injured, healed up enough to participate in the fastest 40 ever contest. Got injured again afterwards.
Exactly.
And then never got paid. I mean, they all got scammed, unfortunately. But I mean, we see a lot of fast players in camp, and the Vikings always find a guy. Terrell Singfield's another good example. Purportedly ran a 4.19, probably ran a 4.33. But they always find like a super fast player on defense and on offense to add, and they don't necessarily always look the fastest on the field. Jarrell Presley at running back is a good example. He was a super athletic player and that showed up, but he didn't look like he had a next level of speed. Both Kene and Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who actually ran a 4.5 at his pro day, I think, look obviously fast, look clearly fast. Their first step gets them moving, and they get behind the defense. Some really talented defenders. And so that's kind of nice to see. that you find somebody who has this purported speed that shows up on the field when the pads are on. And actually, the Broncos had a number of players like that. Trinity Benson, KJ Hamler, even Jerry Jeudy looks faster on the field than his 40 time would indicate. But yeah, you didn't necessarily see that from Jeff Badet. Like if he got into space and had enough of a runway, he would get up to speed. Trey Waynes ran a 4.31, and he's a really fast player, but he didn't.
Yep.
Yeah. But he didn't like run like one of the fastest players on the field. Now, mind you, none of these people I've talked about are probably the fastest player to suit up in recent years. That's probably Dan Chisna, but he won a Big Ten indoor championship in the 4x100 relay. Like that's literal track speed.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And he wears it when he has the pads on. He is also just insanely fast. If he was good at football, that would be really cool.
Yeah, he had a good couple of days against the Broncos.
He did have a good couple of days. It's still pretty clear to me that he's not, like, he's improved a tremendous amount. He's still not really a football player yet. Like, just in terms of,
I don't think you can quite put him on a roster.
Yeah, like
but you could give him another year and try
He's
again.
like the old NCAA football games. He has the ATH. That
Yeah, and you recruit him,
Yeah.
and you play him at quarterback.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think even today when he had a really good day, he cuts on a route and he falls down when he's cutting because his footwork's not there as a receiver.
Yeah.
Ends up being a pick six. It'll be interesting because if he learns much, especially on special teams, which he does have the want to, if he learns more about literally the rules of football, he could be a really exciting special teamer because one of his issues last year was that he constantly committed some penalties. Like he had 3 really good highlight plays and like 6 awful plays on special, which, you know, having like 9 special plays on special teams is pretty rare. 6 of them being negative is a huge problem.
Yeah.
I mean, not many times you see your name called out a ton on special teams. He's an exception. Not always good.
So before we go on and talk about the actual game that's coming up this Saturday, you know, I wanted to thank everyone for coming out to the show, Eric and Luke especially for coming out. And so I came from out west, and I brought a few gifts for the table to show my appreciation to everyone here. And the first thing I want to do is give something to Luke, who I couldn't give this away, sadly. So
No one wanted
It's
it.
deeply cursed.
if you ignore the Shields sticker on this where it's been marked down,
Why would I? That's part of its charm.
I have a Lego Carson Wentz.
Why is it up for him?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because
Why would I want it?
I
I have
have
like no Carson Wentz takes.
I went to NDSU. He hates Carson Wentz, and you give it to Luke?
I'm giving it to Luke for a reason because I have something special planned for the rest of the table.
Oh, great.
Oh, good.
So, Luke, I wanted to give this to you mainly to get this out of my house, but also because I can't, in good faith, give you the signed Christian Ponder football that I have today.
As bad as I want it.
You're going to have to reach across the table.
I do have this.
Yeah.
It is only slightly less brittle than the real life.
There are pieces missing.
No. There's
Okay,
pieces
toy?
floating around.
What happened to the entire right foot?
I know, but it's spread to Quentin Nelson, so.
Yeah.
Apparently,
How many
wow.
pieces? How many pieces?
it lost it back when it had its big sale price. I don't
Hey,
know.
420. 420 pieces. Perfect.
But
I don't know that Carson Wentz would get that reference.
no, he
help.
would be very confused. But for Arif and Eric, I wanted something special, and I wanted something they could share. And when you go over to a friend's house, if they're serving dinner or something, maybe you bring them a nice bottle of wine or something to help. Just to add, like, I thank you for bringing me here and all that. So what I did was, I stopped in Fargo.
Oh, no.
Can you hand me that, please?
I just hear noises.
And I stopped in Fargo, specifically because I saw this the last time I was in Fargo, and I said to myself, if it's still there, I'm getting it. So I got you guys a nice bottle of wine to share, And I know that there's no real rivalry between James Madison University and NDSU, so you should have no problem drinking from the 2019 Division I football champions bottle.
Oh, I wish you could see Reef's face.
If you're not
there,
here and you can't see the look on Reef's face right now.
With the score.
It's like he just
written
saw the
on
Ark of the
bottle.
Covenant.
Why did they keep that? When did they make that?
They
Why did
have
they keep it in
more.
stock?
They have more. At the 45th Avenue Happy
favorite
Harry's. At the 45th Avenue, I believe it's Avenue.
Yep.
Yep.
It is. I used to live half a mile away. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, how many trips did you make, Eric?
What's that?
How many trips did you make?
More than he's willing to admit. They actually, they also had championship bubbly, but I felt like that didn't cover it the way that not only putting James Madison etched into this, but the score as well.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh my God.
Like, the etching is deep and colored. This is a tactile thing. Like, it's.
Arif is reacting like he is the father of Jerry Springer right now, by the way.
It's Maury Povich. And this is a lovely,
Sorry,
this is a
yeah,
lovely
yeah, it's Maury,
2016.
dang it.
This is a lovely 2016 California Red Blend. What else can I tell you about this? I'll put this out for
Absolutely, yes.
for pictures' sake.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, yeah, this
Yeah,
is way
I
better
can see
than
why you got the
Wentz
Carson
thing. Thank you.
Wentz.
Yeah, this is way better than the
This
Carson
one
Wentz.
hurts you way worse.
Yeah, oh my God. Wait, how much did that cost?
I'm not. Well, ignore the PayPal transaction back to my account when this comes in. But
Worth it.
I haven't sent it in yet. But this is the 2019. I'm going to put a photo of this up on Twitter. Photos of this have already been taken, but this is truly a one-of-a-kind, even though there's more of these over at the Happy Harry's.
Beautiful.
And there's different variations of it too, but this is the only one that actually has the name of the school.
So that do they keep making them, or are people just not buying it?
I assume that no. Here's the problem. I assume that NDSU is so tired of winning that they're just done like buying special editions of things. They're like, oh, we'll just buy the next special edition next year. It'll be fine.
Living in the distant past of 2 years ago. You hate
Right.
to see it.
Well, you are supposed to age wine. That's kind of the thing.
So I was gonna say, Eric, if you join the Norse Code League this year, if there is some sort of a wager between you and Arif in a game, I imagine that this could be like a traveling trophy.
Oh my gosh, yes. The
loser?
most missed extra points has to hold it. I think that's a great trophy.
Well, I'm drafting a kicker in the first round.
Greg Joseph.
It's only a matter of time.
So yeah, I showed this to Luke earlier, and I'm surprised he lived to tell the tale. So yeah, this is
You didn't
the.
tell me?
Of course not.
It's
Jeez.
beautiful.
How would I tell you?
It was
Betrayal.
worth the live surprise. This is absolutely worth every second of it.
Yeah. So
At 2, Lucas.
I had seen it a few months ago, and when if I come back here, it's there, I'm gonna grab it. And a buddy checked yesterday, and it was there. So I was happy to pick it up. So
I'm sure you were.
I may have giggled like an 8-year-old as I was like walking up and handing my credit card to the guy at Happy Harry's. Like, this is gonna be really funny in like 6 hours. It's just the only thing I can think about on the 4-hour. The only thing I can think about during the whatever the hell it is you're calling that traffic like thing on the way into town from St. Cloud to 94.
Oh, you mean 94 being shut down for 25 miles right as you get into the Twin Cities? Yeah, that's fine.
It's No, I used to live here. I know what Highway 10's like. It's not much. It's just the only difference between the two is that you're not feeling like you're in the Matrix, like the second movie of the Matrix.
The second movie.
Like I'm not saying that there were guys fighting on top of a semi when we were coming in. I am saying it was that close. Somebody could have fallen off the semi and crashed into the car, and it'd be a terrible situation. So we actually have a game to preview.
Oh yeah, I guess.
How the hell did that happen? So I'd like your opinion on things, and the two of you can join in as well. This is like a joke question. This is actually a serious question about the preseason matchups. Now, as far as games are concerned, when they have joint practices between the teams and then they go and play, is the matchup a little bit better because the teams kind of know what they're dealing with, or is the matchup a little bit not as good because okay, we've practiced against them and there's no like real rivalry, whatever? Like, how do these games tend to go when there has been a actual preseason joint practice?
I mean, there's not like a long enough history for me to like fully go, but like I imagine, I'm trying to remember the Jaguars preseason game.
It was terrible.
Yeah,
I was just
I have to
about
imagine
say,
the talent issues that come with preseason games are going to control every element of the interaction, whether or not they've got experience with the other. So like the fact that you're playing a third-team offensive line against a third-team defensive line matters more than the fact that they've seen each other over the past two practices.
Yep.
So that's, I mean, it sounds like the Jaguars game was just like that. Kind of weirdly, the Broncos' third-team offensive line is like really good. Like, I mean, compared to a third-string defensive line, but like I'm very used to third-string offensive lines getting beat up.
I'm used to first-string offense.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah. So like
We're gonna see a lot of that.
Yeah. So I can't imagine it's gonna make too much of a difference. I guess KJ Hamler's gonna feel more comfortable that he can burn people, but like, yeah, I don't think there's gonna be too much. What's interesting about this though is that every team seems to have a different idea of how to approach the fact that there are only 3 preseason games instead of 4, when to play starters, how long to play them, when to play backups, etc. And so each team is kind of negotiating with the team that they're playing against about what they're going to do, and a lot of them have come to the table with completely different ideas of how long to play starters and stuff like that. So I imagine for the Vikings, because they tend to try and play it a little bit safer in the preseason, especially when they have a team of vets, they're probably not going to play starters all that much, which the Broncos want the opposite because they want more of a quarterback competition with the ones. But I can't imagine we're going to be seeing too much of the starters, especially after a couple of injury scares that we've already seen.
Yeah, and I think this first preseason game is especially going to be a little different because I figure that the second game is going to become what the third game used to be. That's kind of the audition kind of game, like the
dress rehearsal.
Yeah, the dress rehearsal. And the third game is now going to be the fourth game where you got guys trying to make the team and make the final impression. But yeah, this first game is going to be interesting because usually the first game is starters play a series at the most, and that's about it. I would tend to think that the Vikings especially are going to do that, maybe have a series 2 at the most with the starters and then mix in all the other people. And yeah, I think the joint practices are super helpful for the teams themselves in knowing what they have and just seeing other people.
Like how confident can you be in how good the Vikings defensive line is when all they've beaten up is the Vikings offensive line?
Exactly. To get
The
real
Shamar Stephen
opponents
conundrum.
and actually playing something that resembles a lot more, especially with how limited they are with the practices these days. We've seen them in pads, 6 times, I think, so far?
Something like that, yeah.
Like it hasn't been very much at all. And so just to see them going up against real competition, I think that's super helpful for the team themselves. I don't think it really translates much to the actual preseason games because, again, the teams have way different agendas than they're going to have in the regular season. They're trying things out, both with play calling and the personnel, that aren't going to really translate to really wonderful to watch football. But I think that these last 2 days were extremely helpful for both the Vikings and the Broncos.
I feel like it's helpful in a way because you do get some experience against, like, oh, Jerry Jeudy likes this route. He likes to release this way. You get tape on me versus Jerry Jeudy,
sure.
And now I get to cover better and stuff like that. And I feel like that, in a way, will kind of simulate when you're mid-season, you have 4 games of tape on a guy, and you can kind of practice like incorporating those lessons. So I feel like I don't know if that leads to a better product for like us as fans to watch, but I feel like that's kind of part of the advantage of doing joint practices is it gives you kind of a practice run of how to incorporate lessons of, okay, we played Green Bay 6 weeks ago and we have to play them again, and like kind of give you that like helpful kind of practice element.
Yep.
So we have all that. Arif, what do we know exactly about the kind of like if we're looking at it, this is going to be the sort of game that that's typically like the second preseason game. Usually we see starters in for what, a quarter?
For the second preseason game, about a quarter, yeah.
about average, yeah.
But like, it kind of depends. Like, I imagine Dalvin Cook's not going to get much run. We know Danielle Hunter's not going to be playing. So some starters, like, I bet they want Michael Pierce to have a couple more reps. Some starters will probably be in for a full quarter, and some won't be. I think they want to generate some more chemistry along the offensive line, so I'm guessing we're going to see that offensive line continue to play. Depends on how they feel about Rashad Hill, I think. But yeah, I think we're not going to see a ton of Dalvin Cook. We're probably not going to see that much of Adam Thielen, so we'll probably see Kirk Cousins be able to throw to candidates for wide receiver 3, which is going to be helpful for the Vikings. It's going to be helpful for us as content creators. But yeah, and I think defensively, because there's so many new faces, we're probably going to see more of the defensive starting unit, especially because that's what the Broncos want too. And so, that's part of the negotiation for every preseason game. How long are you going to play the starters? So I think we're not going to see a ton of the star players on the Vikings offense. We might on the Vikings defense, except for maybe Pat Pete.
Yeah, and especially with two quarterbacks that the Broncos
Yeah.
are trying in a quarterback competition. I'm guessing if they do negotiate that
Yeah.
let's get the starting defense against both quarterbacks, at least for a couple series, something like that.
So you guys have been watching the second and third teamers for the Broncos. Are there players that are kind of standing out as far as that's concerned, or are there players more to watch on their team? Because this is going to be a game that is going to be kind of boring. It's a preseason game, so you kind of
Right.
you deal with it. But are there members of the Broncos that Vikings fans should be much more aware of as far as like second teamers?
Teddy Bridgewater, Shamar Stephen.
Does he play for them? I didn't.
Right.
Shamar Stephen destroyed Drew Samia for a sack today, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Probably no Mike Boone though, unfortunately.
No
It
Mike
sounds
Boone.
like.
It looked really bad.
That's a bummer.
So Mike Boone was in the middle of a run. He actually went untouched. Tough Borland was chasing, and then he just pulled up like he was holding his hamstring or something. And it was bad enough that he tried getting up on his own. It was difficult, so a trainer had to help him up. He tried walking off with the help of a trainer, and they ended up giving up on that and calling in a cart. So it looks pretty bad. So definitely not going to play in this game. We'll kind of see what the long-term prognosis for him is, which is unfortunate because like Dalvin Cook just yesterday was talking about how everything hasn't really even been unlocked yet for Michael Boone. So he could have been.
I was kind of excited to see him in that Denver offense. I thought he might be a pretty actually significant contributor there too.
Yeah, but among the players on Denver to watch for, I think Hamler is just remarkably exciting to watch. If we get enough of Jerry Jeudy running, he seems to be a pretty excellent route runner. So seeing him get open against the Vikings defensive backs will be kind of fun. And then quarterback Kendall Hinton is going to be playing receiver.
Yes.
Yeah. He had a good moment or two yesterday. I didn't really get to see much of him today.
Are they legally allowed to cut him after he proved his worth? Like, are they legally allowed
It's
to
such
cut
a thing in Broncos Twitter. Like, they're obsessed with him. It's so good.
The Giants cut David Tyree in camp after he.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, the year.
He never played another game.
Yeah, he never played another game. In the camp subsequent to his Super Bowl heroics of a helmet getting stuck into or a football getting stuck into his helmet.
Yep.
They cut him. So teams are pretty brutal. I could see them cutting Kendall Hinton. They have a lot of receivers. So including AAF superstar DeMornay Pearson-El. But I don't know. There's just like a lot of athleticism on the Denver's receiving unit. So pay attention to that. Obviously, they've got a pretty interesting defensive line. A lot of people on Twitter have been talking up Vanderbilt guy Andre Mintz. I don't know. He didn't look all that impressive in camp to me, but apparently, he's been largely pretty impressive in practices. So I don't know. The last time people had buzz about an undrafted edge rusher for Denver, it was Shaquille Barrett. So that seems to be kind of what's driving that. Other than that, I don't know. There's an NDSU alum, so you can ignore him. And they've got a first-round pick corner in Patrick Surtain, who I didn't think was playing remarkably well in camp today.
I mean, I saw a couple clips of him, and it's that's great. But it's corner is an especially hard position to get ramped up as a rookie, and so I mean, he'll have his growing pains. I love the pick. I think he was great coming out of college. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see him not completely.
Well, and
shutting
apparently he
everyone
plays a
down.
more valuable position than quarterback. So.
Well, I mean, look who their GM is. You can take the you can take him out of Minnesota, but he's still a Zimmer disciple.
Well, let's take a look at the last bit of news before we hit the mailbag, and we'll be taking some questions from everyone in the audience here in just a moment. But I wanted to wrap up the saga of Jeff Gladney for just a moment.
Oh, jeez.
Demetrius Underwood.
The Jeff Gladney, who was released basically immediately after we had posted our episode,
Yeah.
and just the only thing you could really say about the situation is that he was indicted by the Texas federal court, and the Vikings looked at the situation and went, "We're good."
Yeah. I think the Vikings just were really waiting to see if it was going to go as far as an indictment.
Yep.
And the fact that the fact that there was a civil suit filed concurrently with that showed that the alleged victim was serious enough to take it further. And I think with that, the Vikings were just very comfortable saying, that's enough. So, I mean, Gladney's gone. The Vikings seem to have planned around him not being around, right? With signing not just
Breland
Patrick
signing,
Peterson, but Bashaud Breeland,
You kind of have to figure the day or two after the news broke, and once the allegations had come out, after watching what happened with the Chris Cook situation,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, let's plan for Gladney not being here anymore.
Yeah.
And you would assume that the team did their own research
Yeah.
internally.
And I think that plays a
probably-
big part of it, yeah.
Probably had enough information to feel comfortable on making those other plans.
Yeah.
So that's all she wrote on Jeff Gladney. Before we start the mailbag, what type of beer is that? And can you get me one of those real quick? I've been staring at it for the last 15 minutes. Can you acquire that for me?
Acquire that for me.
Please procure.
Appreciate that. One of the fantastic things about this particular bar is the AI fully loaded wall of beer in the back, where all you have to drop is just your card that you get up at the bar, and then you can just refill your. I don't know what's gonna be. You finish your drink. Oh, so that's gonna. Yeah, and Eric was talking earlier that he's been cut off by the AI before.
I have.
Yeah.
The wall, apparently more than 2
You've had
IPAs
enough.
that you have to
Yeah.
go back up to the bar and just double check that you're still alive and not falling over yourself. It's a good system.
I
It's a
like
good
that it's
foolproof system.
trying to obey the first rule of
Exactly.
robotics, which is
Yeah.
you can't kill a human.
So-
I appreciate that it's really trying.
You can't just guzzle from one of the nozzles. They do keep that in check, so it's a smart way. Yeah, no wheezing the juice. Yes.
With the skull juice that they happen to have here. We're going to go to Raul for the first question, which is, which starting role does Chaz Surratt spend more time in, linebacker or quarterback?
We actually did ask, hey, so if you get to an emergency quarterback situation, is Chaz Surratt going to be the emergency quarterback? And I mean, they didn't say no in as many words, but they were basically like, yeah, he's got enough on his plate learning how to play linebacker.
Well,
so
and literally the entire quarterback room, except for one, was gone last Saturday,
Yeah.
and they didn't
Yeah.
put Chaz at quarterback.
right,
I think there's your
They-
answer.
They were like, this guy really needs to spend some time at linebacker, and the emergency quarterback plans the Vikings have had in the past are if they run out of quarterbacks, for a while, Cordero Patterson was the emergency quarterback. Obviously, he wouldn't be throwing it that much, but be a wildcat, right?
That would have been cool and shit.
Yeah, right. It would, yeah.
Would have added to his Hall of Fame credentials.
Jerick McKinnon obviously was an emergency quarterback for a while, but not his rookie year. So I think that plays a role. And man, we've seen him throw. He can't really throw, even though he played quarterback in Georgia Southern. But yeah, I think maybe going forward, in a couple of years, Chaz Surratt's going to be the emergency quarterback. But I think for the most part, their emergency quarterback is who do we think can throw the ball reasonably well and is going to be an effective running threat. And I think essentially the Kendall Hinton plan, where they mostly played wildcat and occasionally let Kendall Hinton throw. So this year, I would imagine it could be Adam Thielen, although they probably want him catching. And I think that they've already tried out a bunch of Wildcat with Dalvin Cook receiving the direct snap, and I think they might consider Alexander Mattison because like he throws the ball really well. Like it's kind of weird how pretty his throw is.
It's like, especially for a guy as kind of stocky and built as he is, like he throws a pretty nice
throws
spiral.
a pretty good ball. So I mean, those are options, but I don't think Chasserat's going to actually, unless something goes horribly wrong, play that much quarterback. He actually looks pretty good at linebacker. I'm already going to eat some crow on him. I think he looks pretty good.
I don't even think he's like the most likely linebacker to be like emerging. So every day after
you
camp,
tweeted that, didn't you?
every day after camp, some position group will come, sign a bunch of footballs, throw them up for the kids, right? And so the linebackers were going, and Chaz Surratt they're standing like at the back of the end zone, which is probably from like me to like the bar, call it 20 yards maybe away. And he was trying to like give it to like kids in the front row, and everything he threw fell short of the crowd.
That's a lot like his game against Notre Dame then.
I was like, I couldn't believe, like I checked his number a couple times. I was like, is that not like Tough Borland accent or something, or like something wrong? Troy Dye, best arm in the linebacker room.
Oh, Troy Dye's played a bunch of positions. That makes sense to me. And Blake Lynch has played Wildcat quarterback.
Blake Lynch
too.
was good too. Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah, Blake Lynch was a Wildcat quarterback. He also played a receiver, cornerback, safety, and linebacker. Yeah.
All right, next question is from Kyle, who asks, are the Week 1 starters set, and or what positions are still a competition for the Bengals game?
It's still nominally a competition for the right guard spot, but I think Oli Udoh's won it.
Yeah.
And then after that, wide receiver 3 is not really a starter unless it's like a particular game plan, but that's still a competition, even though I think KJ Osborne's going to win it. And I think on defense, Bashad Breeland is probably won. It's not locked in. He's probably won the starting cornerback job over Cameron Dantzler.
That was the one surprise for me. I thought it seemed like, especially the way that Dantzler finished the season, and it seemed like he's having a pretty good camp. Like just that the veterans going in over him. But that's the only one.
I mean, I do think that Breeland has played better than Dantzler in camp so far, so that does make sense to me. But that's gonna continue to be part of the competition. Linebacker 3 can be a starting job, so we don't know who's won that yet. Nick Vigil is probably the leader in the clubhouse.
Yep.
But yeah, other than that, am I missing something?
I don't think in like true competitions. I kind of think Cameron Dantzler and Patrick Peterson are like competing for snaps with each other now.
Really?
They've been like rotating, but I don't know if that's
I think
just
it's
like
just Peterson's
rest.
old.
Yeah.
Well, are we certain that the starting defensive tackles is? I mean, it's going to be a rotation between the three.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson.
Yeah.
Actually, at defensive end, I was pretty sure that Stephen Weatherly was locked in, but DJ Wanden's been having such a good camp that he might just take the starting job. I don't know. So I guess you could count that as a competition.
Okay.
And Weatherly's been backing off into coverage like Wanham too, so they are in like a true competition.
Yeah. So we'll see, but yeah, most of the starting jobs are locked in.
All right, our next question we're going to take from the audience, and I have a question. Before we do that, does anyone have a small child there's a bit for this? Does anyone have a small, younger-ish child out of this?
The small child to your bit.
Well, no, I'm not saying here. I feel like at home or something.
Like I've got one. He's got 2. Younger than 12.
Party foul.
Because
someone was so excited about having a small child.
this.
Oh my God!
I grabbed this from the store or from the thing today.
That's called a baby.
If it has buttons on the bottom, that is for an infant.
Not like a toddler, but like smaller. What's the word?
What's the word for a very small child that's extremely young?
For the record, I have a 7-year-old and you could fit into this. So it's just like, don't give me any of this stuff. All right, so we have. We do have a potential
a friend
here.
that okay, perfect. Yes.
All right, so if you have a question.
Cousins who are Vikings fans.
All right, well, come up here real quick.
They can wear it in the nursery because it's that
small. All right, come up here real quick and say it into the mic, and I will exchange one question for one Norse Code baby onesie.
Without preamble, we all know the offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings has been a dumpster fire. Saddened at the loss of Riley Reif, as he was probably our best player on that line last year. Do we think that the probably obvious improvement at both guard positions is enough to elevate this year's offensive line over the dumpster fire we dealt with last year?
My initial impression is yes. I think that the issue at tackle is going to be a pretty serious one.
Especially with the Darrisaw thing.
Yeah, the Darrisaw problem at left tackle is a big problem. But I expect
Crandall season.
Right. I expect Brian O'Neill to get a little bit better than he was last year, because last year for him was a bit of a down year in my opinion. But a lot of people consider him an elite right tackle, and he's got that ability. So I think that he'll get there. He did practice a lot in camp against Daniil Hunter, and that did not make him look good. And then he went up against like Bradley Chubb. So we'll kind of see. The initial impressions in camp are not going to be good enough for us to know how good Brian O'Neill is going to be. But I do think that Cleveland is a lot better this year at guard than he was last year, although he did struggle a little bit today. And Oli Udoh has been playing like lights out, a lot better than I expected. Yeah, I think the buzz around Oli Udoh is pretty close. Yeah, I mean Dakota Dozier is going to get some reps in the preseason as a starter, but I think Oli Udoh is going to win the competition. And I think he's pretty good. I think Garrett Bradbury looks a little bit better, but he still doesn't look good, so I don't really know what to make of that. But that is an improvement.
Will better players around him elevate his game?
That's never really been his problem.
Yeah, I don't know that better players around Bradbury are going to help too. Like it's almost certainly going to help not to have Dakota Dozier next to you. But like just in terms of the things that he's asked to do and how well he can do them, I don't know that he'll be able to really improve just from that because of all the stuff that he did individually. I mean, as a run blocker, I mean he's really fun to watch, even if he doesn't have a ton of strength. But as a pass protector, it's just been struggle after struggle, even though some of that comes on double teams, and those double teams sometimes come alongside guards that can't play very well. So I think the offensive line is going to be a little bit better. I think Bradbury's going to play a little bit better. But there are some concerns, especially left tackle and center. But I think the guard positions look really good. I mean, Cleveland had a really bad day today, but overall in camp, he's looked really good.
Well, and I think personally, I will take that trade-off at worse at left tackle, but better in the middle, because we've seen with this offense over and over again with Kirk Cousins under center, that's the number one way to short-circuit Kirk Cousins is pressure straight up the middle.
Yeah.
When he does get pressure around the edge, he can sidestep and he can bootleg, and you can kind of plan around that. But when it comes up the middle, it's basically game over. I mean, you think about the games like the Akeem Hicks games. Basically, if he's healthy with the Bears, that it's over for the Vikings offense. So if they can be more stout in the middle and give Kirk a little more time to at least move around in the pocket, I think that's going to be better for the offense overall.
All right, next question is going to be from Brian Jellerson, who says, I've been hearing a lot of good reports on receivers like Osborne and Chisna competing for the wide receiver 3 spot. Is that positive reaction more out of pleasant surprise after poor performance last year, or does it seem like they've improved enough to garner legitimate excitement?
Osborne, yes. Chisna, no. I mean, Chisna did have a really good day today, mostly. But no, I think that Chisna still has, if he makes the roster, it'll be as a special teamer. I don't think he's going to get any offensive snaps. So the stuff that he's doing well is encouraging for his long-term development. Osborne, that seems to be legitimate to me. I think that he's playing genuinely well. The fact that he's wearing 17 reminds me of Jarius Wright is like not lost on me. I think that he's playing at a wide receiver 3 level. So yeah, I don't really know what more to add there. That does seem like actual borne-out hype.
I might have to bear some blame for the Chisna. I've been hyping him up a lot. But look, here's the thing. It's my fault. Yeah. So last year he was so bad at wide receiver they tried to move him to safety. This year he looks almost rosterable.
Bad enough at safety that they moved him back to wide receiver after 3 days.
Like that's a big leap to, oh man, maybe he's rosterable almost if he had another year. It's a big leap. He's improved a lot. He had a long way to go.
He had tremendous improvment. Yeah.
He needed tremendous improvement and then some, but we're closer. And that's exciting to me because I like the bottom roster drama stuff. But I don't think he's like good enough to like make the team. I think he's good enough to like push and make somebody else be that much better to make the team. I don't think he like should be on an NFL roster yet.
I just think it's funny that the way that the box is set out, it looked like you actually had started working on your Carson Wentz Lego. Like, I don't know how many steps that's going to require, but that's,
you send that to the Colts? You could use it.
I have a Colts fan friend I might give it to.
See, the Norse code is all about making dreams come true as long as it's not about the Vikings.
You're going to send a bag of pieces and tell them it comes pre-assembled.
Oh, that's accurate. One more question, and then we'll go back to the audience. Matt McKeon asks, would an offensive line of left to right, Hill, Cleveland, Bradbury, Udo, O'Neill, really be as bad as Vikings Twitter is making it out? Am I crazy for thinking that it's serviceable until Davis and Darrisaw are ready?
Yeah, this has mostly already been addressed in the audience question, but I'm going to add that I don't think Davis plays this year.
No.
I mean, he's third string right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's competing on the third string right now. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they cut Dakota Dozier. I think I cut him in my most recent 53 and put Davis in the spot.
Thank you.
Injury or performance?
For Davis? I think it's a little bit of both. I think so the person asked injury or performance. I think it's both because he was behind because he had to miss a couple of practices due to injury, and he also wasn't participating completely in spring. But I think also, I mean, he's just not playing well in camp yet. So I don't think that he'll really play this year. So if he's ready, I think that'll be next year. As for Darrisaw, that could be as soon as week 2. It could be as long as week 6. I don't know. But I expect him to play the majority of the snaps this year, and hopefully that improves things. But maybe Rashad Hill plays so well that, I mean, the goal that Rashad Hill had when he signed with the Vikings was that 1-year contract is going to be enough to give him exposure on a starting unit that's going to give him a contract in the same way that Ty Nsekhe for Washington, did that when I think it was Morgan Moses went down, and then later Trent Williams held out / had surgery. So that was, I mean, I think it's kind of the same deal there, where he kind of wants to have that 1 year of exposure to up his value, and he's getting it now.
With Wyatt Davis, I want to so it's been really high highs and low lows. He has every practice, he has 1 or 2 plays where he's moves really well in space, or he just blocks somebody into the rafter, or into the bleachers. He just kills somebody,
into
but he
the
just
rafters.
But he just
Right
lifts
up.
them. Yeah. Hercules Manafa maybe. But then he just has too many plays where he loses to a third teamer, and where he'll just get killed by Kenny Willekes or whatever, and there's just too many of those plays, and I feel that could be that just the kind of lineman that he is, but that's not what you want in an offensive lineman, right? You'd rather have somebody consistently solid than amazing and then terrible, because winning a block by a lot and barely winning a block functionally produce the same value. And so I don't know. I don't know if that fixes in a year, or if he just needs a little bit of time to get more used to the concepts and the plays. Maybe he's thinking a little too much because he's behind or whatever. But yeah, considering that he is only a right guard, and I guess an emergency center, he learned snapping for 2 days, I don't think he plays because Oli Udoh took that job.
Well, and it's not like we're not used to disappointing guards from Ohio State, so this.
He was originally a center. Relax.
Yeah, center / guard.
Well, it's not like anybody who listens to this show that's super into Ohio State, so I think that should be
Nope.
So we should be
I don't
fine.
know of anyone on Vikings Twitter.
That should be fine.
Yep.
For our next question, if someone who would like a 2XL shirt would come up here, I have one here. If you have a question.
I'm a little self.
So for in camp, who's looking better, Boyd or Han, as far as second depth for secondary?
Oof.
Can I say neither?
Good question. Good question.
It's not great.
The only thing keeping those two guys on the roster is that nobody else is good. It's Perry Nickerson and Ty Smith. So I guess they'll make the team.
Harry
but,
Nickerson got roasted today. Good Lord, just again and again. So Harrison Hand had a really good mini camp and spring performance, and that might be enough to just kind of keep him on the roster. The past couple of days have been pretty bad for Harrison Hand. Got roasted by Trinity Benson, I think, on a Brett Rippin deep throw, which is a rare enough unicorn that if you don't see it, yeah. But yeah, right.
Yeah,
no,
you made one of those up.
It's a and you wouldn't be able to know which name I made up.
I'll never know.
Yeah. Trinity Benson from East Central Oklahoma.
You absolutely made that up.
Google it. No, I swear he's real. He had a great pro day, not combine. He wasn't invited to the combine. Yeah. But yeah, Harrison Hand has had a really rough go of it, especially the last couple of days. But his camp overall has just not been all that great. Boyd, I think, has been worse. So that's rough. between the two of them, Boyd is the more experienced and probably the better special teamer. So it would be a shame if the Vikings were forced to make a decision along those lines, cut one of them, because I think Hand has a lot more career-long upside. Plus, he has like more recent performance where he's actually looked kind of pretty good. But yeah, it's been pretty rough going for the two of them. But Harrison Hand had a really strong spring, mind you, without pads. That probably helps him in that evaluation, but Boyd is maybe a better special teamer. But yeah, I have nothing but pessimistic news on that front. Per usual, I guess.
Well, I'm glad that you are speaking in Norse code as opposed to speaking in KFAN.
It's been tough for the both of them. Yeah, that's what I would say on KFAN.
Nolan Kaler has a question. For a Reefs Cookus corner, now that he's a Raider, how will Case Cookus cook us down the road with his Case Cookus capers?
That's great.
That's a great
First of all, that's fantastic. Also, props to you for nailing it. I know how much trouble you have speaking.
Thank you, Arif. The fact that you always have my back is the thing I appreciate most about you.
we have a great working relationship. I think Case Cookus will cook us by probably winning an NFC game against a team that has to win a tiebreaker for the Vikings to be able to make the 7th wild card or something like that. Like, it would be, I guess I have to look up the Raiders' schedule, but it would be pretty remarkable if Cookus was forced into a game against an NFC team, and because that NFC team lost, the Vikings lose like a 4th tiebreaker, and then they can't make it into the 7th wild card spot. That seems about right.
And that game has to end on a Dan Carlson field goal.
Exactly.
Oh,
Cookus drives them down for the game-winning Dan Carlson field goal. Yep.
It's either that or he doesn't end up on a squad.
Well, most likely he doesn't end up on a squad.
He ends up getting picked up because an entire, let's say, Lions quarterback room goes full Kirk Cousins. And they meet in too small of a room, and as a result, they have to sign Case Cookus, who then has to start. And what is that game like? Week 13, week 14,
something like that.
Like that. It's late. He has a knowledge of our offense from being in Minnesota for 3 days.
Deep knowledge of the offense,
and uses it to his advantage. So I mean, there's potential options. Also, Joey asks, clearly Case Cookus was a fake name created by taking the first name of a Vikings one-year wonder, plus the last name of one of our current stars, and adding us at the end to disguise it.
It's more of a comment than a question.
Well, but as the taking off on this, is there another like version of this you could do? Like, could you do something like...
Well,
a one-year wonder.
We were theorizing in the media room, like what would be the fun, and we still haven't looked it up because it's better not knowing. What would be the funniest name for a brother or father of Case Cookus? So like, Courtney would be a good one. Courtney Cookus, Colt Cookus was my favorite, I think. And plus, you get the Case and Colt McCoy thing going, right?
Yep, I like
Case is pretty good.
Yeah, Case is a tough one to beat.
It's hard to improve upon perfection, guys.
Yeah. KC Cookus would be hilarious. But yeah.
But like the initials KC.
That's even better. Yeah, that's good.
You would go to Case and KC. That's
right. Yeah.
Can we put like a change.org petition out there to ensure that when he has a son, that it has to be Case Cookus the
Kurt
second?
Cookus. Kurt.
Case Cookus.
Oh, Kurt, K-U-R-T. Yes, like
Kurt. Oh, wow. Wow, that's good. Kurt Cookus.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that wins. As for, could we do it with anybody else, like other one-year wonders? Like, I'm trying to think of one-year wonders like with Sidney Rice, but more recent.
The first one-year wonder I thought about was Shanko. So, like, I don't know how...
He was good for like a
couple of years.
He was good for a year and a half at best.
Well, Bernard Berrien.
Oh boy, calling him a wonder. He had one long touchdown.
Okay, a one-game wonder.
Yeah.
He was surprisingly good in the 2009 championship game. You just haven't watched it recently. Arif and I have
That's
seen
right, we
that
were like, wow,
footage.
Bernard Berrien is actually pretty good in this game.
Wow.
I wonder why nobody talks about it.
Bernard Berrien is out there mossing people. Why the hell are we like building a statue to him? Oh, because it's this game.
Oh, because of the 6 fumbles and
Right.
whatnot. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of one-game wonders. Like Tavares Jackson was a one-game wonder, right? Like against Arizona.
What about Joe Webb? Could we find a way of
The
incorporating
Joe Webb
Joe
Detroit game, I'm still mad about that.
Joe Webb has like a 10-year NFL career.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
insane.
Was he good
Props.
for all 10 years?
Well, he wasn't good for any of them.
That's what's amazing
That
about
doesn't
He
matter.
won
exactly.
a Tuesday game.
He
I feel like
rules.
that counts. All right, next question is from Ryan, who asks, for a Reef's Doctor of Hernia Repair Corner,
So many corners. So many corners.
I seem to recall that most hernias can be pushed back in manually. Couldn't one solution to Terrasai's injury be he uses one hand to brace the hernia and then do work with the other? He is a first-round talent after all.
Okay, so first, there are no medical professionals on this podcast, and so
Thank
this is
God.
not medical advice, obviously, but also no. But also, I Googled it.
You researched.
You did your own research, huh?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You've listened to the show. Like half of like me talking is a Reef Googling something.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
he'll talk and like Google like while he's
As
forming
I'm
his
talking,
opinion.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, my thoughts on this are. Yeah.
It took like 5 seasons before we figured out how to make it so a Reef's keys didn't clack loudly.
Yeah, I got a silent keyboard, and now also we have a mute button.
Yeah.
But this is the first result was gently push the hernia back into your abdomen.
Oh.
There's more. This may be easiest while lying down. If you cannot push the hernia back into your abdomen, it may have become trapped in the abdominal wall. This is a medical emergency. And that was literally the end of the article.
It wasn't before.
So, well, you got to be gentle with the abdominal wall, I guess. I trust that part for sure.
That was the part that seemed the most legitimate.
The medical emergency part, yeah, the part where it tells you that this is a medical emergency.
What part
seems-
of WebMD were you like looking at for this?
I don't know the source of this. It was one of the Google drop down, like you
So
when
you-
you Google something and then there's like the 4 questions that are
featured
related to it.
paragraph.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And I just
Autofill.
pressed the drop down. So there's literally no source on this.
So what ended up happening was
So if you get a
did
sports
Google-
hernia, don't gently push the hernia back into your abdomen.
Consult a
a
doctor.
medical professional.
It's sort of like Kirk's COVID.
Yeah, let's.
Right, yeah, in much the same way.
So NFL quarterbacks do
When
COVID
you do
research.
COVID research, please talk to a virologist or an epidemiologist, and that's the end of the list.
Do not gently push the COVID back in your body.
Do not push the COVID back up your nasal cavity. This is a medical emergency.
I mean, this is just good advice for everyone.
Don't push it back in your body.
We were talking about how North
It's
Code
usually a terrible idea.
North Code has gone mainstream, and as a result, we are now giving out important COVID advice. This is
That can't be right.
thank God for this podcast. Otherwise,
Right.
the people would be lost.
Yeah, no, that's
Also, as the sole representative from The Athletic on the podcast, please vehemently defend slash justify the take that the Vikings will be the #1 defense in the league this season.
true. Okay, so Sheil Kapadia is one of our national NFL writers, and he decided to rank the top or all 32 defenses in the NFL, and the Vikings landed on #1. And I asked Sheil,
Raised a few eyebrows.
"Hey man, you feeling okay? What's going on in your life?" And he wants to rank it by like predicting like the DVOA, which is a per play metric that accounts for both success rate and explosive plays. So the last season the Vikings were 18th in DVOA, which is a lot better than they were in basically any other metric defensively, like points per drive, points scored, yards allowed, etc. So it looks like on a play-to-play basis and an opponent-adjusted basis, they were just bad instead of awful. With that in mind, his argument is that obviously they're getting a couple of people back. They signed a couple of people. We talked about how good that defensive line looks. He talked about having both linebackers. And then he talked about, signing all of those corners, right? So, like, all of the things that we've covered in the offseason. And then he adds on top of it, Mike Zimmer's basically only really had top 5 defenses except 2014 when he first arrived, and last year when it was 7 new starters, most of whom were rookies. So it feels like a pretty good argument that the defense will get a lot better. This does not strike me as a particularly great argument for being, like, number 1. It's just like, hey, they got a lot better in a bunch of places. There's a couple of elite players, like obviously, Harrison Smith if he plays up to that level again. Obviously, Daniil Hunter, and a lot of players whose names have great resumes. Patrick Peterson might be able to capture back. But when you get to that point, when you get to the third best player, or hopefully the third best player, you're already adding conditionals. And so, there's just a bunch of ways you have to qualify these statements. So, I'm gonna check in on Shield and see how he's doing, if he's in an okay spot.
Like in a couple days, just be like, just wanted to double check.
Circling back. per my last email, you don't seem to be okay.
Exactly. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
So I'm curious specifically as it relates to the Vikings Broncos joint practices. As a measuring stick for Irv Smith, how does he look compared to Noah Fant in those practices?
Not really in the same arena, honestly. Noah Fant is really athletic. Like, Irv Smith ran a fairly quick 40. Noah Fant ran a 4.4. And he's not the only 4.4 tight end on that roster. Albert I'm not going to say his last name. Sure. It sounds like somebody said it correctly in the audience. I'll trust them. But yeah, and he also ran a 4.4. That's a crazy roster. But yeah, Noah Fant is probably not as good of a blocker as and he was a pretty good blocker at Iowa, honestly. But he's probably not as good of a blocker as Irv Smith is right now, and it's harder to kind of tell that from a camp and practice environment. But just in terms of as a receiver, Fant's ability to get open on those seams that are probably going to be Irv Smith's bread and butter as a deep receiver is just kind of its own category of good. I know that nationally, Noah Fant is getting a lot more play than I think he deserves so far. A lot of people have put him at maybe tight end 4, tight end 5. I don't know if I'd put him there quite yet based on his body of work. But thus far, Fant's looked really good. He's going to be limited by the quarterbacks that they have, so we're not going to see probably a ton of deep throws. But in terms of just his ability to get open and manipulate coverage and stuff like that, I think that he's in a different category than Irv Smith. So I wouldn't really compare the two in terms of what they'll be able to do this year. But Irv Smith is a more interesting player, I think, because of all the things that you can do with him in a different way. Line him up at fullback or as an H-back or a sniffer, have him as an arc blocker, things that you can't really do with Noah Fant. But Fant is probably just a more valuable player regardless.
Next question is going to be from Kenneth Allen, who asks, do you think Devin Hester belongs in the Hall of Fame? And more importantly, if the answer is yes, does that mean Cordero Patterson belongs too by the time he's done playing? He already has one more each of the first and second team All-Pro after all.
He has more first-team All-Pros than Devin Hester? Dope.
Yeah. Yes and yes?
Yeah, no, my answers to that are yes and yes.
Best number 1 and number 2 kick returners of all time?
Yeah, well,
best punt returner, best kick returner.
That is an important distinction.
There we go. Yeah, the one I keep fighting about baiting Bears fans with on Twitter.
Not fighting, baiting.
Yeah, well, the best is when you say Cordero Patterson's the best kick returner in Bears history. That really gets them going. I can't imagine why. Well, I like the ones that skip right over Devin Hester and ask you to consider Gale Sayers, which is at least a pretty good argument. I mean, Sayers only had 4 years, but that's a fine argument. But Hester is an above-average kick returner and an elite punt returner, and they're very clearly different skills that require different types of athletic movement. And Patterson is just, by almost every metric, the best kick returner of all time. So I say both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I think if you're the best at your position, and also it's a scoring position. I get the I don't agree with it, but I get the argument for not putting punters in the Hall of Fame. But because it's hard to see how they impact games from a box score level. If you consistently coffin corner someone, that's a huge amount of expected points added for your defense. But the dude has scored a touchdown. That's so obvious. You don't have to explain it. That's fun. Look at it. And in the modern era, Cordero Patterson's the only kick returner to really consistently impact games, not just with his kick returns, but by changing how teams kick. they'll kick it short against Cordero Patterson and not anybody else. And that, like, the Bears over the past 2 years have led the league in field position coming off of a kickoff. And that's not always because Patterson is returning a kick. It's because they're scared to kick it to Patterson, who's the only viable kick returner in the modern NFL with the new rules. So both of them absolutely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame to me. But, like, Patterson, I think, is a more interesting and a better argument as a player to make it. But I think they both should make it.
If you went up to any random football fan and were like, quick, name a returner, they're all going to say Devin Hester. Maybe they'll say Cordell Patterson.
Dante Hall.
They could say Dante Hall,
Like Josh Cribbs. Who else are you going to come up with? Devin Hester.
Percy Harvin.
The Hall of Fame. Yeah. The Hall of Fame is like a legacy accolade. Like, that is somebody who affected the game. It's the Hall of Fame. Devin Hester is synonymous with returning.
The fact that there was a phrase about kicking away from Hester.
Yeah.
And it was a thing that, like, every team seriously had to consider.
Yeah,
he broke the game, exactly.
Steve Tasker's in, right?
Is he?
I think so.
Sure.
Yeah. So if he's in,
oh yeah, if you can have a gunner in, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
And while we're talking about gunners, let's not forget about Cordero Patterson's ability.
Elite gunner.
As an elite gunner.
Always.
One of many first-round gunners
there.
for the Vikings.
Laquan Treadwell was a pretty good gunner.
Trey Waynes,
great gunner.
Surprisingly good gunner. The thing that I want to mention, though, as far as Patterson is concerned, is that the thing that kind of burns on his memory ends up being more of the fact that even Tom Brady couldn't get him to be good at, like, wide receiver.
Yeah.
Like, even Tom Brady couldn't figure out a way to use him like a Moss. He's getting a Moss situation. No, he's not.
Yeah.
The Patriots are getting a fantastic kick returner. They're not getting a Moss situation.
Yeah. I mean, they got a couple of good runs out of him. Not as many good routes.
He's a better running back than wide receiver there.
Yeah. But he's just a special returner.
All right, next question is from Damian Barrett, who asks, following his Pulitzer-esque study of the Anthalia conflict, bees, James, I wanted to quiz Arif on my observations. I get no respect on this podcast. On my observations of the growing turf war between birds and squirrels in my neighborhood. Is this a common conflict between the species, and which side should I align myself with?
I'm not going to put myself into another animal race war. That's not happening. You can't make me can't do it.
Just go bees again.
I suppose you could just do a blanket statement about how bees are the superior ones in this case.
That sounds like I'm putting myself into a species race war. I'm not going to ask if these are Italian birds or Russian squirrels. These are not questions I'm going to raise.
Or if they are Africanized bees.
Okay, that's screwed up.
It's a term that
I
gets
understand
used.
It's a term in the bee community, which, having done research on the bee community, is not a community I want to ensconce myself in. It's a rich and thriving community with a couple of problems. Birds and squirrels, sure, that's a conflict. That's probably really a conflict in suburban neighborhoods more than it is like in nature, but they do have similar food sources. So yeah, why not? Don't align yourself with one of them. Let them fight it out.
Are you suggesting that you play both sides in this situation?
You don't play a side. They just do their thing.
Shoot them all and let
My as a side note on this particular topic, for whatever reason around the area of my house and the street, and my wife can confirm this, for whatever reason, hundreds of crows just randomly appear.
A murder of crows.
A literal murder of crows
Okay,
appears in the street and just confuse. It makes noise to the point where like all the neighbors come out and like look out to see if like something is cursed. Or if like something has been sacrificed outside.
Right. Does it like usually happen around the beginning of Viking season?
Now that you mention it, it happened like last week.
Yeah,
there you go.
There's your sign.
Yeah, it's a curse.
There's your sign.
Okay, well that.
All right, so after we've had our discussion on the birds and the bees and also squirrels.
Now I'm uncomfortable. Rick and Morty made the comment about you don't mess with the squirrels. So
don't mess with the squirrels.
There is that. Damien also says, Also, following your snubs of doing these live shows when I was in both Minnesota and Baltimore recently, when will you align your live shows to my schedule? What exactly does my tree fitty pay for? I'd just like to point out to Damien that we did the New York show and you didn't show up. So,
Mr. Chance.
if you want us to go back out to New York, we'd gladly take the donation to make this work. Are there any other questions from the audience?
So I'm just curious. I know it's sexier to talk about pass blocking, but I was saying, how do we compare Rashad Hill's run blocking to Riley Reif's run blocking?
Riley Reif wasn't really a particularly great run blocker until last year. He kind of figured it out, which is kind of weird to say about like a 10-year vet.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he was really phenomenal last year in a lot of aspects of the game. But in terms of like just overall his career, he was like a functional run blocker. The Vikings would often run opposite his direction, which would allow him to be a hinge blocker, which requires a lot less power because he's just taking care of the end man on the line of scrimmage, make sure they don't run fast enough to be able to catch the running back on the backside. So it wasn't that important, but this year they were able to take advantage of more of the stuff that he can do, especially on the move. Rashad Hill as a run blocker, especially in these joint practices, hasn't really stuck out as spectacular or anything like that. He's clearly more of a pass-first kind of tackle, which to me is more valuable. Obviously to the Vikings, I think they just prefer the run blocker, despite kind of like what analytics would tell you to say to prioritize. I don't know, he just kind of got folded in joint practices today as a run blocker. And so we saw a bunch of runs up the right side, not as many on the left side, although that did kind of improve as the day went on. Overall in camp, I think as a run blocker, he seems kind of this like functional. So kind of similar to Riley Reif. He doesn't strike me as somebody, and I'd love to be wrong on this, but he doesn't strike me as somebody who's going to be a dominant run blocker. He seems like he's much more of a pass protection tackle. Luke, do you see anything different?
I guess just stylistically, like Riley Reif, at least last year, Riley Reif was much like he was more mobile. So like you could kick him out and he could, be part of a screen a little bit more easily, or he could reach a little more easily. Yeah.
It felt like he fit the system better last year.
Yeah, and Rashad Hill, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but he feels like more of a power guy to me. Like he's very strong, but he doesn't quite have the movement skills that like Riley Reif had, which makes him less useful because like it's functional. Like he's a guy and you can put him in front of a guy and he'll steal the guy off.
Yeah.
But
certainly a person.
Yeah, but like you can't ask him to like go out and get a linebacker that's or you can't ask him to do that as easily. You're gonna have to ask somebody else to do that. So he'll probably like when that all ends up in like grades and stuff. That might end up evening out a little bit, but like Rashad Hill will do, I think, a less valuable job.
Is that part of why they would slide Cleveland over to that side? Because he's going to climb better?
Possibly.
Yeah, so the question was, is that why they would push Cleveland to that side? I think it plays a role. So one thing that Phil Rauscher mentioned in his presser was that guards have a lot more responsibilities in the run game in this system than tackles do, including stuff like you mentioned, like going up to the second level, doing stuff like folding out and kicking out. I think one of my favorite things to watch when offensive linemen run block is when the guard folds out and goes to the opposite side of the tackle and blocks outside, usually on a safety or a linebacker. Those fold blocks have been in the NFL since the NFL was founded, but I think it looks really cool.
Yeah.
And so they can have guards do that more complex role. The tackle often has a very clear responsibility in the run game, and it's usually the end man on the line of scrimmage. The guard has to kind of make a lot of decisions. They have to determine whether or not they're covered, and depending on the play, whether or not they've got a person ahead of them on the play side gap, on the backside gap, and whether or not that's true, if they've got someone at the second level that they've got the ability to reach when they count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is kind of part of what you have to do in zone blocking, and see if they have to block down first and then move up, or there's just a lot of decisions they have to make. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that made them excited about potentially having Ezra Cleveland at guard, but really they mostly moved him to the left side because he played on the left side in college and he's much more comfortable there, and I think that's borne out in camp thus far, where he looks like a much better guard than he did last year. Like, I know PFF kind of liked how he did at right guard last year. I kind of disagreed. I didn't think it was all that great, but I think so far this year at left guard he's done really well, and I think a lot of that, and he mentioned this in his presser, it's just he was using a lot of muscles he wasn't used to using after doing 4 years of training on the left side. Now, not only does he have those built-up muscles on the left side in terms of left-handed movement, but also the muscle memory to activate and fire them quicker and react faster to what's happening. So I think that's more of it, but it does help that in this system, guards are being tasked to do with a lot more in the run game.
If they were going to move him to guard, why didn't they move him to left last year instead of pushing him to another side in a different position?
So the question was, why didn't they move him to the left side last year instead of pushing? I think they just were comfortable with having Dakota Dozier there, which is a very
it's like more
sentence.
mystifying.
That's the worst sentence I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Dubious.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's been some choice ones tonight.
Yeah.
That's true. That
But
is
I
true,
think
yeah.
the original plan wasn't like Pat Elflein, and then they cut him right before the season. Yeah.
Well, they cut him mid-season, and then he played like right guard.
Yeah, it
because
was
then he
like
got
injury.
hurt.
It was
He
like
was
3 or
injured,
4
and
months and then got hurt.
they had to
and
wait
then-
to not have to pay an injury settlement, and then
Yep.
they cut
Yeah.
him. Yeah. And then the Jets picked him up, and he had a couple of really exciting-looking blocks, despite overall playing pretty poorly. And
Now
Twitter
he's-
got weird about it.
And now he's starting for the Panthers, and they're talking themselves into it.
All right, fantastic.
There are so many Vikings cast-offs that teams are
Just
talking-
like Matt Khalil.
I mean, Willie Beavers is involved, and it might be.
Yeah,
I
Willie
can't
Beavers
process
might
that.
start for
He
Atlanta.
might start for
I
Atlanta.
cannot
Yeah.
process that.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as we had mentioned this during the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl recap show or whatever, but the moment that we saw the former Vikings on the Chiefs' offensive line, we both knew that game was over.
It was done. Rip.
Like, oh god, they're screwed.
Mike Remmers is back in a Chiefs uniform
Why?
because they really don't trust Lucas Nyang.
Like
a lot they
It was
don't.
the sort of performance that like allots you the ability, I think, through the NFL collective bargaining agreement to literally shoot him out of a cannon to get him away from your facility. So
Well, that might have been only his second worst Super Bowl performance. Did you remember him
Yeah.
when he was with the Panthers and Von Miller basically lived in the backfield too?
oh god.
Just stop putting him at left tackle.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a
And
left
guard. He's a right tackle. Just let him be a right tackle.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's okay at that.
All right, let's go to Don from Ohio, who asks, how many hits can Kirk Cousins' plexiglass take before it breaks?
Whatever it is, Dakota Dozier will find that number.
Yeah, we'll find out.
This I swear. Also, for a Reef's Garden Corner, we planted our first garden this year and have had mixed results with tomatoes, jalapeno peppers, and red peppers. They are getting enough water and sun, and the soil is premium, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet.
Any other ideas why some plants are growing veggies and some aren't?
First of all, there is a shocking lack of detail in this question. I have no idea which plants are growing and which aren't. Is it just a mix of all of them? Also, no way I can answer this question. I don't know anything about botany. Okay, so he says they're getting enough water and sun and the soil is good. So, I just have to take it on faith that those things are true and that his diagnosis is accurate. Maybe it's not. Maybe he should consult somebody that knows something about gardening.
And this concludes a Reef's Gardening Corner.
Yeah. So my mom
Consult
has
a botanical
been.
professional.
My mother has been a Minnesota master gardener for 2 decades.
Has she transmitted any of this knowledge to you?
No, but I can ask her. So send me more detail. Send me pictures of your plants, and my mom can fix your problem. She
Luke,
can fix everything.
Luke, I don't know if this is
So this is from Don from Ohio.
This is from Don. Do you really do you really want
You
this?
I
wanna
did
go
not
down
catch
this
if this was
rabbit hole?
from Don from Ohio. Please do not contact me. I just thought this was somebody else. I totally wasn't listening.
Don is many things. He's a lot like bed bugs.
Yeah, please do not contact me, Don.
You know what? Actually, I think it's more like glitter. The moment you get glitter into your house, the only real way to get it out is burning it down. So, it's not. I don't know if it's like that exactly, but finally, from Kyle Slaby, he says, "For Reefs, you're gonna have to pronounce this. Is this
Onerology?
Onerology corner? Sure.
Onerology.
For
Why not?
a Reefs Onerology corner.
That means the study of dreams.
Last night I had a dream where I won a massive amount of money at bingo. I have a terrible memory, but I do remember the winning number being B5. How many boards should I play at next week's game, assuming I can get multiple boards with B5 on them?
Did the bingo book that you got cover this?
No. The bingo book that
So
I
you didn't
got...
read it?
This would be much funnier if I still had beer in my glass. But because I thought it would be funny and it could add something to the joke, I did in fact read the Don from Ohio bingo book that he gave me.
Because I thought it would be funny. Yeah, you became a bingo expert.
I did not. In the same way that you Googling something didn't make you an expert in like anything else, but we still call it.
I crushed the abdominal wall question. I dominated it.
No, you gently pushed the
You gently pushed the hernia question back. No, I can't say that the book covered this. However, I do have a story. And my beautiful wife, who happens to be here today, can verify this particular story because she woke up very upset the other day. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she had a dream that I left her for a bingo person.
Amazing.
Hey, see it?
Amazing.
Yep. So,
A genderless bingo?
no.
Don't shame.
So what had happened was that she that apparently in this dream we were out somewhere. I think it was a bar in Grand Forks, and a woman was over by our area and proceeded to.
Was it one of the dreaded bingo people that you're racist against?
It was. She came up and she started talking. No. Correct me when I'm wrong here. We were all of a sudden. She asked me something about bingo.
She was 96.
So she was.
Walker.
She was 96 and had a walker and started talking to me about just being nice and started to ask what I thought about bingo, and I proceeded to tell her. And she thought that was funny and charming. And
So
then
the 97-year-old lady that asked you about bingo?
Around her stoma.
around her stoma was proceeding to ask me about bingo and my thoughts on it, and I proceeded to tell her my stories about the bingo people getting into fights and all that. And she thought that was funny. And then she asked what I did like. She was talking about darts or whatever, and I said, and I was very charming and nice there. And it ended with.
Did she have a tirade against darts? That would be amazing.
No, she thought that was great. That
good for you.
A young fella like me had an interest in something. It might have been the old lady from Beetlejuice
Well,
in the
I'm
dream.
glad you have hobbies.
Yeah, it's nice to have a trade, isn't it? So this happens, and she proceeds to tell me about all of her other friends who are bingo people who would think you are just so special. I have to show you to my other bingo people friends. And she left, and I proceeded to tell my wife at this bar that apparently I may be pimped out to a couple of these bingo ladies, and she proceeded to wake up and be very upset with me for some reason about this.
Well, yeah. I mean, you were getting pimped out. Like, why wouldn't she be upset?
That's her right.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm upset at Don from Ohio for bringing up the question.
And she woke up she was angry for like 3 hours about this. It is the.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah, it was the situation like where your
You
wife
should be
dreams.
held accountable for what dream you did.
You're lucky. It could have been days.
It's going wow.
It could have been days. Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
Yeah, 3 hours is pretty generous, honestly. Props to your wife.
And
Very forgiving.
And that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code.
Oh, this is still the Vikings podcast? Okay, all right.
I'm ending it here.
And may you all go dream about bingo tonight.
I'm taking this bottle of, what is this again? This is 2016 California Red Blend.
Beautiful.
And planting it in Arif's home.
Oh.
So Arif,
I don't even have gloves.
He just visibly recoiled.
We have to keep this a secret if we end
From
up.
who?
Well, we have to keep this bottle a secret if the fall trip goes as planned, and we end up potentially going to James Madison's homecoming.
Oh, right.
So we have to
Yeah, we can't take that to James Madison territory.
No,
that's awful.
This might have to live at Eric's house. But before we go, let's start with this. We'll end with Arif. Eric, what do you have to plug as far as writing stuff over at the Norseman?
Amazon Web Services.
I'll be tweeting a lot, all that fun stuff. The weekly previews will be back once the season starts, and in the meantime, Flip and I have been doing our 20-minute rapid fire podcast, the Viking Hot Takes. So keep a look on that. Keep an eye out for that, and I cannot wait for the actual real football to start.
What is your handle on Twitter?
It is Eric_J_Thompson, because if the name is common as mine, you have to throw in underscores.
Awesome. Luke, what do you have to plug? Do you do like a daily show? Is that it?
It's something goes online every. Yes, you can find the Locked On Vikings podcast Monday through Friday, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL, and I write once or twice a week at zonecoverage.com.
All right, Arif, how about you? Have you submitted any articles to make your editor cry? You were talking about that on with Paul
this
Allen.
one's a doozy. It's longer than the offensive line piece. Yeah, I'm writing up a longer defensive line piece, going over every defensive lineman the Vikings have in camp, and talking about the performance thus far, including how they did against the Denver Broncos offensive line. Obviously, I've talked a lot about how good I think the defensive line looks this year, so I've got a lot of fun stuff to say. Got a bunch of quotes and presser interviews in there, so that one's going up hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, depending on how fast my editor can edit.
Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for coming in. Super appreciate it. Super appreciate it. We'll be giving away a couple things here just right after the show. But before we leave, once again, I want to thank everyone for listening. And please remember to punch reality right in the face. And we will be back next week talking about the Denver game. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.